Hi, I'm Walt, and this is Delta Astrophotography. In my last video, I photographed Rho Ophiuchi with a Nifty 50mm lens and a Canon T5i. If you'd like to check that out, it's right up here or down in the description below. In today's video, we're going to stack the data, process it in a program called Cyril and Photoshop. I'll be stacking in a free software for Windows called Deep Sky Stacker. If you're on Mac, you can try using Cyril to stack your images. It's also free software. In one of my last tutorials, I went over a little bit about how to stack in Cyril, and I'll link that video in the description below as well. We'll also be starting out our processing in Cyril. It's free software, so if you don't have it, go get it right now. Once we get into Photoshop, I will be using some paid plugins, RC Astro's Noise Exterminator, Star Exterminator, possibly Gradient Exterminator, but I don't think so. I apologize for using paid software, but there are free alternatives. For example, instead of Star Exterminator, you can use StarNet version 2. I'll have a link for that and all my software in the description below. And finally, I'm going to leave a link to my TIFF file that I'm processing in the description below as well, so you can follow along with me. All right, that's enough talking. Let's jump in and start processing. Okay, here we are in Deep Sky Stacker. First thing we're going to do is come up to Open Picture Files, and we're going to load in all our light frames. Go to the folder where we saved our light frames, select all of them, and hit Open. We'll do the same thing with the dark files that we took with the lens cap on. Click on Dark Files, navigate to wherever you saved your dark files to, select all of them, and hit Open. If you took any other calibration frames, such as flat files or bias, open those here as well. Let's go to Flat Files, navigate to my Flats folder, select all of those, open, and the same for bias. Click Offset Bias Files, navigate to my Bias folder, select all of those and add them in. Now we're going to click Check All, and then click Register Checked Pictures. We're going to come down here to Recommended Settings. Now, if you see anything in here that's not green, it'll probably have a recommendation under there for you. Go ahead and click what it recommends. Down here at the very bottom, you have two options for background color calibration. I'm just going to select the top one for now. The image is going to come out looking a little green, but I'm doing this on purpose because if you stack with other software such as Cyril, the image might come out looking green. So that's just kind of a normal thing. We're going to leave it there. I'm going to hit OK. Right here where it says select the best 90% of pictures to stack, I chose 90% because there might be a few bad files in there with some wonky looking stars. Deep Sky Stacker will go ahead and get rid of those for me. All right, now that that's all done, we're gonna hit OK. It says I've got an estimated total exposure time of 3 hours, though it's gonna be a little less than that because I told it to only stack 90% of my files. All right, we're just gonna hit OK, and the stacking process will start. This will take a few minutes and I'll be back when it's done. Okay, Deep Sky Stacker has finished stacking. It has created an autosave file, but I prefer to save my own file, so I'm going to come over here to Save Picture to File. I'll save it in a folder of my choice as a 16-bit TIFF file. Give it a name, Rho for YouTube, and hit Save. Okay, we're done with Deep Sky Stacker. Now let's open that file up in Cyril. All right, here we are in Cyril. We're going to start by going to the top, clicking Open, and navigating to where we saved our file from Deep Sky Stacker. Here it is, Rho for YouTube. Hit Open. And as you can see, it's quite dark, but that's very normal. We're going to do an auto stretch. So let's come down to here where it says Linear. Click that and hit Auto Stretch. Now this didn't actually stretch the image. It's a stretch preview just so we can see what's going on while we do some corrections. And as you can see, it's quite green. That's pretty normal. It's full of light pollution. It's got a huge gradient over here on the right side. We're going to take care of all of that in just a minute. But first, I'm going to take our mouse, kind of put it over here in the corner a little bit. Left click, hold, and let's drag out this little crop right here. We're basically cropping out any stacking artifacts that could appear on the edges of our image. Once I've got my crop drawn out, I'm just going to right click and hit crop. There we go. Now let's go ahead and get rid of this gradient, green color cast, and light pollution. Let's go up to the top to Image Processing, come down to Background Extraction. I'm just going to turn Smoothing up a touch, turn on Add Dither, and hit Generate. This has added a bunch of sample points to my image. It's just trying to detect where the background is. We don't want a sample point on our nebula at all, so we can just right-click on a sample point to get rid of it. And we can double right click to get rid of multiple sample points in the area. So double right click. If If you're having a hard time seeing where Rho Ophiuchi is, you can try another type of auto stretch. Let's come down here, we can try histogram instead. Yeah, we can definitely see a little bit more here, or at least in the center. It also greatly exaggerates that gradient. Double right click around all our little nebulosity here. Change it back to the regular auto stretch. I might put one sample point or two over here on this corner. There we go. I think that's good enough to detect the background. So we're going to click Compute Background right here. There we go. That gradient, all that light pollution, the green color cast, they're all gone. I'm going to hit Apply. Normally the next step I do is called color calibration, but it involves drawing a little square in a background area with no stars. And honestly, there is no such place on this image. Every pixel on this image is covered in multiple stars. But screw it, let's just try it anyway. Draw a little square in a background, just kind of a neutral background area. It's about as best as I can find on this image. Image processing, let's go to color calibration. Color calibration. And for background reference, we're gonna click Use this selection and hit background neutralization. That's not too bad. Now let's draw a little selection around a white star for the white reference. Hit Use Current Selection down here and hit Apply. See, in my opinion, that didn't work like it was really supposed to. It kind of almost has a reddish orange vibe about it now. Let's hit Undo a few times. Let's undo color calibration and undo background neutralization. Honestly, I think that looks more neutral, so we're just going to pretend we never used color calibration at all. Let's do one more thing in here. Let's go to Image Processing, and let's select Remove Green Noise, and hit Apply. There we go. And that looks good to me. We're going to go ahead and save this image and move over into Photoshop. Go to the top, to this drop-down arrow right here, this down arrow. I'm going to go to the folder where I want to save this file to. Under Supported Image Files, let's select TIFF, and give it a name. I'll call this Rho for Photoshop and hit save. I'm going to make sure 16-bit is selected and hit save again. Okay, basically what this is trying to tell me is that the image is not actually stretched. Once we save it and open it up into Photoshop, it's still going to be dark. We're going to have to do the stretching in Photoshop. That's fine. Let's hit save anyway. All right, let's close out of Cyril and open that image up in Photoshop. Okay, we've got the image opened in Photoshop, and as you can see, it's still very much dark. So we're going to start stretching it. First, I'm going to duplicate the background. I can do that by right-clicking and select Duplicate Layer, or I can just hit Control or Command J on my keyboard. I'm also going to click this magnifying glass and come up to the top and hit Fit Screen. There we go. We're going to start stretching now by opening up Levels. We can do that by going to Image at the top, Adjustments, Levels, or Control or Command L on your keyboard. I'm going to come to this middle slider right here. This is your mid-tone slider. I'm going to pull it in right to this data spike that's all the way over here on the left. Pull it in. There we go. And hit OK. Let's bring up levels again, Control or Command L. Now we're going to take the darks or shadows and move them over to the edge of the data spike. Not past it, but just right up kind of to the edge. There we go. Let's hit OK, and we're going to repeat that process one more time. Let's bring up levels, Control or Command L, and bring in our midtones again. We don't want to bring it in too much. We're not trying to get the nebula real bright right now. We're really just stretching our stars till they look kind of how we want them to look. If we kept stretching until the nebula got bright, our stars would be huge and bloated, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So I think right here the stars look very good and natural to me. They're not out of hand, so this is good. Let's hit OK. Let's bring up levels one more time. Control or Command L. And let's bring the darks in to give us some contrast again. There we go. Let's hit OK. Now we are going to separate the stars from the nebula and work on them each separately. So let's go ahead and make two duplicates of this image. I'm going to do that by hitting Control, Alt, Shift, and E. That's Command, Option, Shift, and E on a Mac. And then I'm going to do it again. Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Now we have two new copies of this image. I'm going to double click the top one, and I'm going to name it Starless. Double click the one below it and name it Stars Only. Let's click back on the one that says Starless. Come to the top and hit Filter. Go down to RC Astro and let's hit Star Exterminator. I'm just going to select OK and let it do its thing. This can take a few minutes, so I'll come back when it's done. Okay, Star Exterminator has completed. We now have our starless image. Now let's create our stars only image. Let's go over here and turn off the starless image and select the stars only layer. Now let's come up to the top and select Image, Apply Image, and under Layer, we select Starless, and under Blending, we select Subtract. Set our offset to about 1 and hit OK. Now we have a stars only image as well, and before we move on, let's go ahead and just give these stars a little more color, shall we? Let's go up to the top to select, Color Range. Under this drop-down box, let's select Highlights. I'm going to turn fuzziness up and range down till we see some stars in our box down here. That looks good. I'm going to hit OK. Come back up to Select and come down to Select and Mask. Under View Mode, I usually like to have black and white selected. I'm going to turn Contrast up and Feather up. I'm really just going for the brighter stars. There, that looks good. I'm going to hit OK. And we're going to come to Image, Adjustments, Vibrance, and just turn Vibrance and Saturation up to about here. I think that'll look good. I'm going to hit OK. Let's get rid of these marching ants by going up to the top to Select and Deselect. You can really see kind of the orange popping out in Antares right there. That looks good. So we're ready to move on. Let's go back to our starless image over here. Click that, turn it back on. And let's create a duplicate layer by hitting Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Command, Option, Shift, and E on a Mac. Let's stretch this out a good bit more. I'm going to bring up Curves. I can do that by going to Image, Adjustments, Curves, or hitting Control or Command M. All right, got curves open. I'm just going to click right here around my data spike and just bring this up. You never want your line at the top to go straight and flatten out on the ceiling because that means you're clipping data that you don't get back. So let's just keep it a nice little curve like that and hit OK. Now let's bring up Levels, Control or Command L. Let's bring the shadows over to the data spike right there, give it some contrast. There we go. Let's hit OK, and let's do another curve stretch. Control or Command M. Bring up curves. This time I'm going to click higher on the line. Click, drag it up. Now I'm going to click down here towards the bottom, click and drag that down to create an S shape. This is a classic S curve. Hit OK, and let's just repeat that process. Control or Command M to bring up curves. Let's make another S curve. Let's bring that up. Let's come down to the bottom, click and drag that down to make an S shape. All right. Honestly, I think I could probably get away with doing it one more time. Control or Command M. Bring that up and this down. Okay. If I'd gotten a few more hours worth of data, I probably would have done that a few more times, but I think we're kind of pushing it right here. I'm just going to double click the layer we were just working on and call it Stretch. And now I'm going to duplicate it, Control, Alt, Shift, and E, or Command, Option, Shift, and E. There's one thing I'm seeing in here that looks kind of like a flare of some kind. I'm going to see if I can get rid of that by clicking on this Band-Aid looking tool, right-click and make sure Healing Brush tool is selected. I can change the size of my healing brush with the bracket keys or with this right up here. So the way this works, I'm going to hold the brush tool kind of in a clean looking area and Alt or Option, click, and then click right on this flare and it's gonna heal it. I'll just do that all around this little circular flare looking thing. Alt click, click. Alt click in a clean area, click. Okay, there we go. I think that healed that nice. Another thing I can do is a little bit of noise reduction. As you can see, that's starting to look kind of nasty. You can do this by going to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And by the way, the way I'm zooming in and out is left clicking and dragging left and right. So we're going to come to our detail tab right here, and you can turn up color noise reduction and then just noise reduction. Just keep in mind, if you use this noise reduction, you're really going to soften your image a lot. So just be careful with that. I'm not going to use this noise reduction, just the color noise reduction, and I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to use Noise Exterminator for my noise reduction. So we're going to go to Filter, RC Astro, Noise Exterminator. Just going to leave the denoise around 75%. Just leave detail alone completely and hit OK. Okay, Noise Exterminator is finished. Let's make sure our zoom tool is selected and just kind of zoom in a little bit. That's much, much cleaner. All right, now let's bring out the colors. I'm going to create another layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Command, Option, Shift, E on a Mac. Now, if all these layers get to be a little too much for your computer, you can always merge a few. Just make sure you don't get rid of your stars only image. That's extremely important. But if you need to merge a few, just click the top one, hold Shift, and click one down here. Right click, and hit Merge Layers. My computer can handle all these layers, so I'm not going to do that. All right, so let's bring out some more color in this. I'm going to go up to the top to Select, Color Range, and once again choose Highlights, but I might turn this range down a little bit now. We really just want the brightest part of the nebula selected here. I think that looks good. I'm going to hit OK. Let's go back up to the top, Select, and then Mask. Let's turn our contrast up a little bit. We're just trying to get the brightest stuff in there, kind of like that. It looks good. Let's turn feather up until everything's nice and fuzzy. Okay, and let's hit OK. Now we're going to come down here and click this button right here, Add Layer Mask. And as you can see, it's added a layer mask. But instead of selecting the layer mask, let's click back on our actual image, like that right there. All right, now let's come up to the top, Image, Adjustments, Vibrance. I'm going to turn Vibrance and Saturation up a little bit. It's starting to look really good. Let's do that one more time, Image, Adjustments, Vibrance. Yeah, those colors are really starting to pop. All right, I'm going to create a new layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Let's go ahead and create another layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E, so we have two new layers. I don't want my second mask to be interacting with this mask down here. So now let's see if we can affect this red right here a little bit. If you had an Astro modified camera, that should be popping out pretty good. If you didn't, you might not see as much red, but that's okay. But I've got a little red, so I'm going to see if I can make that even more red. I'm going to go to the top and hit Select, Color Range. And this time I'm going to choose, instead of highlights, sampled colors. Gives me a little dropper. I'm going to click right here in the red. Just kind of adjust my fuzziness until really just that area, that red area in the middle is selected, and I'm going to hit OK. So go back up to the top to Select and Mask. Let's turn that contrast up a little bit. Let's turn Feather up a little bit until everything's fuzzy. And hit OK. Let's come down here and add a layer mask. This time I'm going to open up the layer mask, so I'm going to Alt click it. It's probably Option click on a Mac. I'm going to Alt click my layer mask so where I can actually see what's going on in there. And I'm going to get rid of some of this Milky Way down here. Make sure this is on black. And select our brush tool. And I'm just going to brush out the Milky Way down here. There we go. Right, click back on my magnifying glass. All right, let's select on our actual image. Let's go to Image, Adjustments, and this time we're going to use Selective Color. On colors, we're going to set it to red, and we're going to mess with the cyan. That brought out the red a little bit. Let's mess around with magenta. There we go. Just moving it over to the right. Made it a darker red, and I think that looks much better. Let's hit OK. All right, I'm going to go ahead and merge these two layers just so we won't have 8 million layers going on. Click this, hold Shift and click the one below it. Right click over here and select Merge Layers. All right, let's create another layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Now I'm going to see if I can bring out the blue horse head just a little bit more. I'm going to select, color range, kind of click over here around the blue horse head, and just mess with the fuzziness. There we go. You can kind of see it in there. Let's hit OK. Go to the top, select and mask. Bring up the contrast to where I don't see a whole lot more than just the blue horse head. Looks good. I'm going to hit OK. Actually, let's turn the feather up just a little bit. Get it blurry. Okay, let's hit OK. Let's create another layer mask. Once again, I'm going to open up the layer mask by Alt-clicking it. Probably Alt or Option-clicking it. Once again, I'm going to make sure this is set to black. Select my brush tool. I'm going to kind of paint over or erase anything that's not the blue horse head. Let's blur that a little bit more. Let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. There we go. That's nice and blurry. Hit OK. I'm going to come over here and click on the actual image instead of the mask. And let's go to Image, Adjustments, Curves. And let's just pull this up slightly. See? Got the blue horse head brightening up just a touch, but I mean just a touch. It will look very bad if you pull it way up like that. So that's good enough for me. I'm going to hit OK. Let's just go ahead and merge these two layers. Click this one, hold Shift, click the one below it, right click right here, merge layers. Now let's create another new layer. Control Alt Shift and E, Command Option Shift and E on a Mac. The last thing I'm going to do is maybe see if I can get some more color in the Milky Way core down here. So we're going to do this process one more time. Select, color range, choose sampled colors here, click down in the Milky Way down here. I'm going to click the Add Sample button and click another area in the Milky Way as well. There we go. Kind of adjust my fuzziness a little bit. Let's hit OK. Let's go to Select, Select and Mask again. Once again, I'm going to turn the contrast up a little bit, but not too much. Feather it till it's blurry. There we go. Let's hit OK. Let's come down here and add another layer mask. Once again, I'm going to hold Alt and click on it, Alt or Option. Make sure black is selected, open up our brush tool, and let's get rid of anything except this little Milky Way down here in the corner. All right, let's click back on our actual image instead of the mask. Image, Adjustments, Vibrance. Turn the vibrance and saturation up a touch. Yeah, really bringing out that brown orangey color in the Milky Way down there. I like it. And I'm going to hit OK. All right, let's just go ahead and merge these two layers. Click this one, hold Shift, click the one below it. Right click right here. Merge layers. And let's create a new layer. Control Alt Shift and E. Now let's bring the stars back. So let's come down here to Stars Only. Click it and let's drag it all the way up to the top. Now that we've got Stars Only at the top, where it says Normal, let's change that blending mode to Screen. There we go. It's Screen. Looks good. See now where around Screen where it's highlighted blue. Let's get rid of that blue by just hitting the Escape key. And let's create another layer. Control Alt Shift and E. Now we can just do some final adjustments if we want. We can bring up levels. Control L. Bring that in just a touch. We can go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Let's go to the Basic tab. We might be able to bring up Dehaze just a touch. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And before I added the stars back, I probably should have maybe added a little clarity, but that's okay. I think it looks fine without it. Let's hit OK. Let's zoom in and see if it got any noisier. Maybe just a touch. Let's run Noise Exterminator one final time. Filter, RC Astro, Noise Exterminator. Denoise at 75%, details just left at default around 31, and let's hit OK. All right, that looks so much cleaner. That is just as clean as can be. And that is pretty much our final image. From here, you can just do whatever you want with it. filter, camera raw filter. We wanted to try to make it even more vibrant if we could, but I think that just looks really bad. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna call this one done. And we made it all the way through. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As with a lot of my processing tutorials, I don't expect you to actually have to follow along step by step exactly like I do. I just want to show you some techniques that I use, and hopefully that'll help you improve your astrophotography processing. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to help me out personally, you can give me a super like. And of course, please subscribe, because there's going to be lots more of this coming out this year and hopefully forever. So thank you guys so much for watching, being huge fans and supporters. I love you guys very much. All right, as always, stay spacey, clear skies, and good night.